Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and CA is going to be sharing with us today, thanks to Darren, the Dark Elves campaign. So this is going to be pretty awesome. It turns out they're going to be doing multiple parts of this, showing us a lot of little details. And I'm going to just be kind of scrolling through this, pausing at various instances to go over little details that you may have missed, and then also give my feedback on what Darren has said. First and foremost, we do want to comment on the sheer graphical detail that they're putting into Game 2. Everything we've seen thus far shows that it is above and beyond what we've seen previously. I mean, you have all sorts of things built into the mountains. I know we did before, but now the artists have really put in even more details. You'll be seeing later as they gloss over Nagaroth that there's like lava flows and all kinds of crazy stuff. The ice details look better than before, so they've refined upon everything. So that's great to see. Anyways, Darren is going to be saying that basically in this campaign, he's all the way up to turn, I think it was 72. And then here he says, well, he's only, even seen half the map. So it goes to show just how much there is in this entire game. So he's explored the north and the south. The enemy has been doing a lot of consolidation, moving forward with some of their rituals, and you'll be seeing a little bit of that. And despite the world being so far afield, there are ways to influence it with interventions and whatnot. And they'll be displaying that in this video. Darren does say that there's a couple things going on here. So basically, he's going to be up north, the northwest of the kingdoms. So you can flip on the overlay tab, or the ownership tab. So he has a Malekith, so he secured his holdings in the north. So yellow is your forces, blue is allies, red is enemies. So there's a couple different pockets of what appears to be rebels. Over on the far west side, a settlement here, or a ruin, I should say, that most definitely has Skaven, I would imagine, this late in the game. And then various other forces here, some troops you can come in and invade, and then you're seeing these glittering little icons here, two of them on this map. There'll be one further southeast, and we'll get back to that later in the video. Darren does talk about that, but yeah, pretty decent expansion, and you can see how large of a swath of allies he's made. That leads me to believe that there is pretty big mechanics around confederating or subjugating large swaths of Dark Elves. Same thing happens for the lizard men and other forces. You're going to want to consolidate your allies and do confederations because the map is so big. Conquering all this would take so long. But yeah, we have different ways to toggle through these fields, and look at the northern straits of the great ocean here, sparkling with lightning. That actually makes me think a little bit about something that Darren says later in the video. So he says later that Malekith, essentially to get to the south here, wandered through the oceans, passed through here, and went through lightning and vortexes. A little bit of his description made me think that the amount of storms and disruption was tied perhaps to the ritual state. So maybe the campaign map may become more dangerous the further along and the more destabilized the vortex is. It wasn't clear about that, but that could be a potential way they could tweak things on the campaign map to make it even more dynamic. So that would be rather interesting, I would think. And then, yeah, basically what Darren says is he's secured his holdings back at home, and then now he sent Malekith forward to attack basically the High Elf Fortress, and that's because they're going to be trying to get their own ritual site. So he's going to drop in here at Vol's Anvil. This is a place where the High Elves make their armor and weapons in this giant forge here. But yeah, what they're going to be talking about is the scrolls that we just mentioned. But again, as they're plotting through this, keep an eye on how amazing the details look on this map. So each of these unique settlements has something really cool. Anyways, he glosses over this scroll, and now we finally get to see what this is. So it's a ritual resource site. So a couple things to take away from this. One, Darren goes on to say that this applies to all factions. So there's going to be multiple of these types of settlements around the world that are ritual resource sites. Controlling them will give you essentially the ability to construct a building, and once you have that building, then that building will contribute to whatever your resource is going towards the rituals. So if it turns out for the Dark Elves, it's the Scrolls of Hakardi. For the Skaven, it was the Warpstone. And now that we know that little bit of information, we can go back to the very beginning where you saw the campaign map. So if we go back here, take a look at the map here. There's two more of them, one located here, another one at the top. So it appears that each continent is going to have maybe 2 or possibly even 3 of those ritual sites. That's going to be an interesting thing. So it allows you, to get one at home safely, and then maybe one a little bit further afield. And these are going to be very critical because all factions can control them. So it's going to be a key settlement to defend and attack to try and knock down the enemy as they're trying to push along their ritual progression. So that is a really cool mechanic. I love that CA implemented that, and I love the fact that they're located in strategic locations that change the dynamics of what you want to conquer and why. It would be kind of cool if there'd be a way to tech up your city to be, you know, the highest tier, and then all of a sudden it becomes a ritual site, like some way to create new ones of these. But you know, that would be another ability to make this campaign map dynamic. But for now, it seems like they have kind of locked them in. So anyways, we get to see here that it's the Scrolls of Hecate, and then CA does push at the top. You can see that here are the various rituals that you can try and unlock. It takes more and more, and then finally at the end, that's the final ritual, and then after that, there's going to be a big battle. And then what's really cool is it shows you the progress of the other factions. So right now, Lothern is in the middle of doing its rituals. Clan Moors and Hexatl are following closely behind, so you can see that Darren isn't necessarily the top of his class. He's being a little bit beat out by the High Elves, and that's why he has armies here to try and take the settlement over, or that's why I guess he did recently, to knock the High Elves down a peg and slow down their progress. And then he's going to click on the city here, and he's just going to show you that, hey, in order to get the scrolls, you do have to build this structure. So here, scrolls of Hecate generated 10 per turn, and then if you upgrade it, you can get presumably I would think 20. But I did want to throw a little bit of comparison here. And what actually, let's pop out of this real quick. So I had pulled up my old Skaven video. We were looking at Skaven. So in my campaign, I had been early on, and essentially, if you look at what was happening here, it did say that currently I was gaining 4 warpstone per turn from buildings. So as far as I could tell, my buildings did not have that ritual resource site. So that's kind of interesting. So I guess some buildings can get your currency, but it's just that the ritual creation ones add that much more and can be upgraded. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Perhaps this is just a Skaven only mechanic. But anyways, one of the things I did want to mention is that later on when I kind of scroll over this, it turns out that buildings get you on the order of 4 to 10, but then just for comparison, missions, at least when I did one for the Skaven, got me 60. So yeah, that's a little bit of the comparison of, you know, what kind of resources can you expect to get in terms of your ritual resources. So yeah, 60 for missions, but those are few and far between. So at a standard resource building that gets you 10, it'll take you 6 turns to get the equivalent. So that's fair enough. And then, of course, you can upgrade it. Next, Darren plods over here. He shows us Lothern being the capital, being one of the multiple settlements that has that's locked into this ritual. So it's well defended. And what can happen, actually, when you have these rituals is there's always 3 cities. And some of the other cities may not be revealed to you, but you can follow the winds of magic here, which is pretty cool, to where that settlement is. So it's a nice little indication of that visually. And yeah, so they're trying to buff up, you would presume, the Vortex. And then here you can see the Lizardmen have sent a marauding army to try and come in and attack this. It's fairly small, so perhaps this was an intervention. I don't see anything else. I don't see... I mean, it's a small army. I don't see a fleet. So presumably this is an army that wasn't just sent as an invasion, but it was actually a staged intervention. You'll see later that there's multiple tiers of intervention. Judging by the health of this invasion army, I would say it's either tier 1 or tier 2. But yeah, keep in mind that the major factions can send interventions to assault those cities. So they're going to be relatively hard to hold, especially as you get to the higher tiers. There's going to be automatically armies spawned from Chaos, and then there'll be more from the enemy that can come in as well. Then he's going to talk a bit about Malekith here. So he is one of the 2 kind of main forces attacking Ulthuan. So he does show the skill tree. I believe the UI is a little bit changed up. So for instance here, the traits, many times when you're doing your skill tree, you progress along kind of tiers. And now they've kind of made a nice little UI to show you what stage of the tier have you gone. So the good attacker trait here can go all the way up to 6. And Darren in this campaign is only at 5. So I like that nice visual touch. It's really cool. You can see the various armor and enchanted items and arcane items that he's collected. And also really like that you can get a high elf slave. So pretty cool little details there as always. And then they'll be going over, so here you can see it's a quick way to summarize what you would have gotten from the skill tree, and then having a high elf slave will boost your income from your settlements, and then also more fighting against high elves. So a bit sadistic to keep your enemy as a pet like that. And then the skill tree here, lots of different bonuses that you can have around. What they did mention is that now your lords, your legendary lords, can get up to level 40. And that for Malekith in particular, I think they said there's about 100 different skills that you can invest in. So lots of different ways to create your lord. And you can see here he's going up the tech tree in terms of getting unlocks for mounts. And you can get a Cold One Chariot. And then finally, you can get a dragon. And yeah, it turns out Darren had said he was following along the lines of magic, get really interesting stuff. Word of Pain is powerful, and we've seen the Blade Wind spell in battle. I used it in a campaign objective, and it was really powerful. It goes around, not as wandering as previous Vortex spells, and does a fair amount of damage, especially against light units. So that one was cool. And then here, Power of Darkness, you can get it more and more, and it reduces the Winds of Magic cost, and then also the cooldown time, and yeah, so I don't want to go through every little detail here, but suffice to say there are a ton. And then the high level ones here, as Darren was saying, you can go all the way up to level 40. So yeah, pretty sweet stuff. So these lords are going to get kitted out. Then next they're going to go over back to the army, and this is where we're going to start to see interesting stuff. You might imagine, hey, what's this force on the right? Well, that's going to be a Black Ark. So Darren says that his force is a little bit weakened as of a battle that they fought, so he's going to go ahead and move it over to the Black Ark here. And then what you can do is these Black Arks function as mobile settlements, so pretty similar to the lore. And what you can do is you can bring units from that Black Ark, transfer them as if you were merging with any army. So it's going to be a cool way to do things. So the Black Ark, as they'll be talking about, can recruit forces, can help with replenishment rates for nearby armies, and also it has a range of bombardment. So if you look at this ability here, I believe those are different bombardment spells that are tacked onto this army, meaning that it is within the support range of the Black Ark, so it has the availability of these different bombardments. Darren is going to talk about what he intends to do. So essentially he wants to knock out this ritual from the High Elves. So instead of attacking Lothern, which already has an army coming at it and is pretty well defended, he's going to try and scout out one of the other settlements over there in the distance. So he's going to move out, and then he's going to click on the Black Ark. The Black Ark is going to be told to follow. So as we can see here, the Black Ark has the unit itself being the ship, and then it can have various units that you recruit upon it. The Black Ark can move around, obviously, and yeah, the Black Arks function like a settlement. I believe you can tech it up, and it has different stances. So the first one here is pretty interesting, the Stance of Dread Expansion. So this one, any armies within the Black Ark sphere of influence may recruit units directly from it. So awesome, a mobile replenishment and recruitment one, and you can see the replenishment rates increase for anyone within the sphere of influence. But then all of a sudden now it can't move. The other ability here appears to have a sword out for the passenger and then an arrow, so that essentially just allows you to move and perhaps will allow you to have bombardments. I would presume being stationary like this will disable bombardments, but I'm not quite sure. He didn't really gloss over that movement one, so I couldn't get onto it. But anyway, a bit more about the Black Ark. So I did talk to CA about this, and so Black Arks, as you'll be seeing later, can get recruited by having rites. But anyways, you have you can recruit a certain number of them, and then when they're in the field like this, you can move them around as Darren is showing. You can get multiple ones in the same place, and what they'll essentially do is they can provide support, as you've seen here, but it's interesting. So they can be taken out, and they function kind of like a settlement, but I was wondering, what happens if you have a settlement at sea? What happens when an enemy attacks you? Is it going to be like a battle that you drop into? And it turns out, no, these guys are they count as naval forces, and so it'll be an auto-resolve battle. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I might actually make these guys a little bit more vulnerable to gimmicks if anyone knows how to manipulate the auto-resolve, and it's a little bit roll of chance. So these guys could potentially be fragile, but I assume having the Black Ark itself does count for something. It has a pretty big bonus in terms of kind of the balance of power in an auto-resolve battle. So that was kind of interesting. And then, yeah, they're going to move up, and then he's going to go back home and talk a little bit about what's going on here. So essentially what's going to happen is there is a mission that popped up, and it's essentially talking about a rogue army here of some orcs that popped up, and he has a quest to go ahead and take it out. Actually, I want to go back real briefly to that little icon. Yeah, you can see here. So doing this mission gets you 20 Whereas when I was playing as a Skaven, a mission got me 60. So there's a range of different missions that you can have, some of the larger ones getting you more. But anyways, you can rank this up. So 20 here, compare that to the building, that's 10. So yeah, just giving you a little bit of perspective. So anyway, Darren's going to talk about how he wants to go ahead and take out this rogue army, the Mangy Hounds, I believe it was called. And essentially, it's an army with a conglomeration of different units in it. And it has... I mean, we'll be seeing here, he chases it away, and then he's going to go and try and supplement it. But anyways, a little bit more about the rogue army, so they can pop up as you saw here. I believe it could be in response to low public order, or they just kind of pop up randomly. And what they can do actually is they'll grow over time if you don't get rid of them. And essentially, if they end up taking over a settlement, then they'll start their own faction. So that's kind of cool, an emergent faction of sorts. So what Darren's going to do is he's going to grab his assassin, a kind of an assassin, and there's a pretty cool ability called Scavenge, where essentially if you integrate it in your army, it'll then give you bonuses to the income you get from post-battle loot. So that's pretty sweet. So he's going to try and embed this within his army before pursuing this rogue army. So there you go, he's going to go in there, and then he's going to chase after this rogue army. You can see the army here actually doesn't have that much rogueness to it. It's pretty standard low-tier goblin force. So yeah, not too much to be said about this. They're going to auto-resolve and claim it, but also keep an eye on what's being generated here. So the traditional ones, experience, loot, upgrades and rank. But then here, if you look at the different things that you get at the bottom, so you get enemy captured, different levels, and then here, if you choose to enslave the enemy force, you get 162 slaves. So I'm not quite sure if that's the same. Yeah, okay, so enemy captured. So I presume in battle, if you want to micromanage things, kind of like we did back in Rome 1 days, you would take your cavalry and run over all the routing forces, and I hope that would tick up the enemy captured rates. I'm not quite sure. If it did, it would be a great way to kind of farm slaves. But anyways, this ends up being kind of this stock amount of potential enemy captured, and you can do different things with them, kill them, free them, I believe, or enslave them here. So by enslaving them, you can it'll add to your slave army count, and we'll be seeing Darren play a bit with that. The slave mechanic is going to be obviously unique to the Dark Elves, very closely tied to their lore, and yeah, we'll be taking a quick look at that for Darren. Also keep an eye on the back. There is one of the scrolls that we had seen previously. He does show us that this hero here, or perhaps it was Lord, has different names that you can get. So taking one of these will lock out the other two, and then once you take on one of these names, it'll give you buffs in that realm, and then you make a choice after this. So I just love how much detail that Seeing is putting into this, how much choice you get. But anyway, so you can see there was one choice of 3 to be made, and then after that there's an additional 2 choices, and this will change your name. So it's going to be an attachment, a little addition to your standard name, so that the actual name of your character will change. This has me very excited for historical titles in the future, where if you go back to if they were to go back and do Rome 3 eventually, what they could do is, if your Roman army campaigns in the east and does lots of things and gets upgraded, then you have choices that you can make like this, and you would be, first you have a general called Pompey, and then, oh, look, do this ability and you will be called Magnus or Scipio Africanus, different things like that. So I'm always excited, about the stuff they're doing for Warhammer 2, but also the implications of what it means for future Total War titles. So you can see here, different choices will give you different bonuses. This one here, barbed lash here, more public order and income from settlements. So anyways, choices. And of course, cool art in the back. But yeah, here, Velvetith, barbed lash. There you go, you get a new name tacked onto you, and then a permanent addition to your traits. So again, just super cool, super interesting stuff. He's going to go ahead and recruit some more bleak swords, because he knows that he's going to be doing a ritual here soon. And then he's going to go up north, and Darren's going to try and get some more captives and booty. So he does have a force that's roving around in the sea, pretty high upgrades. That's going to go ahead and stop on over at one of these sunken areas, and this has the chance to reveal an army. And of course, if it's on land, you would fight that battle. Perhaps it would be against Skaven in a ruin, but at sea it would be auto-resolved. But Darren has a full stack, so he can be pretty ballsy about this. But anyways, Darren does say in the video that it is pretty important to capture these because they have really important buffs. So for instance, Lost Cargo here, holy crap. plus 30 growth across all provinces for now, and then income from all buildings plus 10% for all regions. That is incredibly beneficial. You can imagine if you have a macro house going, just how much of an uptick this will be. But yeah, you can go ahead and grab this. I did talk to CA a bit about these sites at sea, and it turns out that once you grab them, they will go away, but then they will come back and replenish over time. So a really cool feature to keep you exploring around the world and doing things. And especially for the Dark Elves, I presume there might be a way to get more bonuses from these looting mechanics, because the Dark Elves are supposed to rampage around the seas, plundering and grabbing booty. So presumably the Dark Elves may have a mechanic that helped them get more out of that. But yeah, he gets a weapon as well, and then he's going to go over and go after Blacklight Tower. So yeah, he's going to come after these guys, and he's just going to be intending to get slaves. So Darren's going to end the turn, and then here he's going to talk a little bit about how the end turn mechanics work. It's a change to the UI that we talked about previously, but you'll see him go up here. Well, actually, maybe not this end turn. Oh, no, it is here. Sorry. So he's going to talk about it, how, hey, it might be annoying to follow agents all over the world, so he can pause, and then he can change just for this faction, or for all allies, all enemies, or all players, change what you're following. He could turn off heroes. He can change what view you're seeing. So really cool stuff. I love that CA went into the depths of this UI. Really awesome. And that's going to help a lot of players. And I presume it was a necessity because they had to implement this probably for the combined map, which is going to have ridiculous numbers of different factions in it. So they had to, think on their toes and create more ways to speed up the end time turns. Anyways, Darren's just managing a little bit of stuff at home. You can see Marathi actually positioned here, obviously a staunch ally of Malekith. And yeah, she has her own settlement. And I believe, okay, there it is. The scroll, the ritual resource site is a little bit higher up. But yeah, also I did want to point out, look at this. Oh my god, the burned ground looking so good. It is mouth-wateringly good. Anyway, they're going to skip through to the different factions. You can see Trace, not quite sure how you want to talk about it, but that was found. And then here, finally, we're going to get to the slave mechanic. So a sacrifice of Cain expired, and then you can go ahead and get more sacrifices. So this is sweet. So this is where you open up the rites. I had previously gone over what Skaven had to offer, and Skaven could recruit like some Doom engineer or something that could blow up a building. They could have like a plague and all that. So anyways, rites, new mechanic. So essentially what it turns out to be is these rights, you can expend your specific faction resources. So in this case, for the Dark Elves, it's going to be slaves. For the Skaven, it's going to be food. And then you can get different things. And one of the things I wasn't sure about previously for Skaven is, hey, do these rights replenish? And it turns out that, yes, they do. I think CA did confirm here, because take a look at this. The Black Arc, you can raise these Black Arcs, and this right will become available after 11 turns. So there's a cooldown rate for that. So that's kind of interesting that these rights can be triggered over time. So it's another way to spend your particular faction resources. As for what you can get for the Dark Elves, well, it's pretty obvious. I'll let you look through these. Sacrifice to authority here, more public order, and then you have you can increase the loyalty. So loyalty mechanic here being key, I guess, to all factions, not just Skaven. That's interesting. Sacrifice to Hikari, more experience for your forces, more winds of magic for all forces, and more agent action success. Sacrifice to Cain here is pretty interesting. So you get an army ability for all forces, Dark Conduit, more income, tons of boosts, and then the final one here, the most expensive one, allows you to get a Black Arc. So yeah, this is the way you would recruit these. And they are to be recruited from any port settlement. So if you're by the sea, that's where they will essentially pop up. So that's it for this one. And yeah, we don't get to see anything from the Black Arc stats. But I mean, we already know kind of how they function. So Darren here is on the rampage on the campaign, and he's going to perform this right, hoping to shore up, I think, his economy at home and get some buffs all around. And then he's going to take a look at the slave mechanics, and this has me super excited. So for Skaven, the food mechanic was rather basic. For the Dark Elves, slave mechanic is going to be very interesting. So essentially, slaves. You can see it as the resource at the top. It doesn't function like a scroller bar. If we pivot back to Skaven, you can see the Skaven food mechanic had different tiers. High tier had more buffs. Low tiers had debuffs for you, so you wanted to keep it high. For the Dark Elves, you don't necessarily have the same mechanic, but there can be downsides to having more slaves. So essentially, your slaves are going to be distributed amongst your cities. They have different carrying capacities depending on the size of the city, and then you get these slaves. And basically, the slaves in each city can, I guess, go up or go down. So when he did that sacrificial rite, it means that they're going to be sacrificing slaves across the board, so their population is going to go down by percent per turn, but you can have ways to increase them. Anyways, the more slaves you have, it does different things. So it can affect income, and it can affect public order. So right now it tells you the current income and public order, and then the slaves can impact that. So the more slaves you have, the more income you have, but deleteriously, it can also bring down your public order. So there's a bit of a balancing act. So he's going to be talking a bit about that. And yeah, they can have a buttload of slaves. I mean, Darren is slacking in terms of his slave recruitment. That is insane. 11,000 slaves. Holy crap. That is going to take a long time to get. But yeah, like Darren says, it's going to have different impacts on your settlements. And this has me very excited for historical games. Holy crap, I am so excited for this because, my God, can you imagine if they had a slave mechanic like this for Rome 2? Slaves were vital to the Roman economy. And it had a very similar mechanic where slaves were used at latifundia to work the fields, work the mines, do all kinds of stuff. But at the same time, you look at the 3 servile revolts, especially in Sicily, the third one being the one with Spartacus, and yeah, definitely public order. I wish they'd had this in Rome too. This is so perfect for that. But anyways, like we've seen, the innovation that they're allowed to do in Warhammer means that we'll be unquestionably, I would imagine, seeing this in a later Total War thing. But anyway, there's another cool thing here. So essentially, you can toggle on each city's stance towards slavery. So when you go ahead and you have that battle and you get slaves, the slaves are going to be automatically distributed to your cities, but you can change essentially the state. So you can toggle on their state. If you think a settlement is tapped out or you don't want it to have more slaves, you can put the stop hand on them. And that means that when the slaves are distributed, it won't be distributed. So it'll be, if you only leave one ticked on, then it will get all the slaves. And then what you can do is you can actually, have a couple ticked on and then put one of them as like request additional slaves. So in this case, it will receive 3 times its normal share. So there's different ways to play with that. So that's cool. So here you can really turn all of them off and request as much as possible just to nag around here. And that would be one way to fill it up. So anyways, like I said, I'm very excited for that slave mechanic, not only for Warhammer 2, but also for historical titles. So freaking cool. Next, he's going to attack this settlement, and he's just going to auto-resolve. It's a pretty easy battle, and then I believe he's going to go ahead and just sack it. And you can see sacking here will get you 603 slaves, so a pretty fair amount. And then he's going to leave it to the enemy. And there you can see all the slaves went to Nagaron. And then finally, he showed a little bit of the treasury, showed that his economy went up from boosting slaves everywhere. So yeah, slaves, if Nagaron is a big powerhouse, you can give it a little bit more slaves as well to boost its economy yet further. I did want to go backtrack a little bit more. So this is interesting. So there is one of these basically places to plunder at sea. And essentially, in order for Darren to go to sea, it looks like he's going to have to go through a city. So that leads us to a little bit of a discussion of naval forces. So naval forces, as far as I can tell in Warhammer 2, there is no way to recruit dedicated naval forces. You don't recruit different tiers of ships. Instead, all you do is you send forces at sea. So when I was playing the Skaven campaign, I was desperately trying to find ways to recruit naval ships. But it turns out, and I think what people had seen from Total Biscuit's stream as well, is that there was no way to recruit specific naval forces. So it's only people going at sea. That's a little bit disappointing. I was hoping to be able to recruit, light and fast raiding vessels or big tanky, like destroyers type vessels, things like that. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like you have a choice. You're just going to be sending units at sea. And then also, when they go at sea, it looks like you're going to have to do that from a port. So a little bit of a different change from what we'd seen previously. I think before you were able to just go into the sea at any point. But then again, it could be the fact that there are, cliffs everywhere. No. Look, there's a little bit of beach here, and he did definitely go through the city. So it looks like CA is changing things up a little bit. You guys feel free to correct me if I'm misanalyzing that, but I think that's the way they're changing that dynamic a little bit. And then he's going to go around through the sea, and this is essentially where he said Malekith was moving down here to attack Ulthuan. And Darren talks about, the different whirlpools and lightning storms and things like that. And that's what I commented in the beginning of this video, talking about, hey, do those change over time? Does the amount of destabilization of the vortex impact what types of stuff is at sea? And yeah, essentially unconfirmed, but it could potentially be the case. But then finally, Darren is going to move forward his forces. Malekith is going to go on land, and this Black Ark here is still standing strong, and he's going to get a building on it. And let's go back actually, now that we see a little bit more about the Dark Ark. It has 10 building slots for different tiers. I assume it will cap out at a tier that's a little bit lower than most forces. But anyways, you can still get recruitment buildings and things of that nature. And the Black Ark itself, I guess you can upgrade it to different levels, and hopefully that'll buff up its garrison force and its combat ability. But yeah, that's about it. Sorry, we missed it. I think there was a little bit of an indication of the settlement level, so let's just wait a quick second here. Yeah, there you go. So it looks like the Black Ark will cap out at tier 3. It could be that the building caps out at tier 3, but I think the Black Ark probably has a max level of 3. So yeah, a little bit more information with that regard. Anyways, Darren's going to talk about his final move for the end of this campaign, which is going to be to move on that High Elf city. But then on the west, he sees that, he doesn't want to get backstabbed by that army if they beat the Lizardmen. So what he's going to try and do is stage an intervention. So an intervention here can be triggered, I believe, once for any faction against whoever has a ritual. So in this case, there's 3 tiers, different amounts of money that can be spent, and depending on the tier that you recruit it means that an army of various strength will pop up and attack one of the ritual sites. So in this case, Lothern is going to come under attack. Darren is going to choose to invest, I think if I'm recalling it correctly, yeah, the highest tier. So there you go, it pops in. So this is tier 3. An army appears right next to the settlement, so a little bit OP. In the sense that, holy crap, how are you supposed to defend from these armies popping up? You can imagine if a bunch of different factions do this, what the hell's going to happen? But I guess it just means you're going to have to sit tight, literally sitting inside your city, and just maybe even have an additional army in support, because these armies are going to be popping up right on your doorstep. So that is about it. He's going to go ahead and end the turn. An interesting little thing to take note on here as the turn will cycle over is he recruited that intervention army to try and attack that main settlement, and it's going to be an AI controlled force. You can't really do anything, and they're going to go and try and attack that main settlement that is doing the ritual. But it turns out that they do have a little bit of flexibility. So in this case, what's really interesting is this force here came and attacked a separate settlement. In the video, Darren said that that's probably because the Lizardmen are still besieging the settlement. So in the event that the High Elves, in the event that your intervention army can't complete its task, it looks like it'll kind of wander and meander to do damage nearby. That's pretty devastating, because you imagine if every single enemy faction essentially stages an intervention, and you have 5 different armies standing outside your gate, only one of them can siege. That means 4 more armies that are going to attack your nearby settlements. So holy crap, that has a lot of chances for devastation. Man, that is going to be pretty brutal stuff. And then finally, Darren's going to move on here towards Carnthale, and then he's going to talk about, hey, I've gotten enough rituals to begin his own ritual. So he's going to go ahead and do that. So the ritual of the hated foe, the second victim chosen by the ritual, whose life force shall fill the goblet, is hated foe, the Azurs, an Azur that the sorceress Felsion has tangled with in the past. And then he shows it. So it looks like it's going to be the standard thing where it shows you the 3 cities, and then it pans over to the vortex, and then after this it'll do what it always does, which is warn you of incoming armies that are going to attack you. So in this case, it's 2 Skaven forces, or might be more than that, but anyways, because it's a tier 2 ritual that you're popping there, you saw that there were 2 armies, whereas when I was playing as Skaven, it was a tier 1 ritual. There was only 1 army, so you would presume, tier 2, 2 armies, tier 3, 3 armies, 4, 5. By the 5th one, you have 5 armies coming down you, and then I assume also any interventions that are staged against you, those will probably be upgraded as well. So I really like how CA has changed the endgame mechanic. That is a very nice way to do it, because previously endgame mechanic was some army that came out of nowhere and attacked you, but now it's kind of just built into your progression. So that's a really interesting way to deal with the endgame mechanics. I presume there's also going to be another endgame mechanic, but this is one way to specifically deal damage to your faction. I mean, armies are popping up literally just to target you, as opposed to Attila the Hun, who's rampaging through a bunch of different areas. So anyways, that's kind of cool. He's going to move up to try and put himself in close support, although that Black Ark is dangerously unfortified. I mean, if you take this army and it attacks him, I imagine they could actually knock out that Dark Ark, so a little bit I would be wary for Darren. Anyways, he's going to end the campaign here, saying that they will pick up with us tomorrow. I might do a video on that, but then again, I think we've covered a fair amount of details, so they'll probably just show gameplay. Last little thing here, I do want to show, hey, look at all these bombardments that are here. I think 3 of these are going to be the bombardments that are coming from the Black Ark, and then the 4th one here is going to be from that sacrifice to the sacrifice that they did. This is an ability that applies to all armies because they triggered that. So anyways, that's about it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for more, and definitely check out the full video from CA as they walk you through it. And that's it for this one. See ya. Peace out.